What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Mirjam Leunissen, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I am on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today is a special episode with 6 special guests who had the courage to join me spontaneously for recorded conversation during the NeverDoneBefore Facilitation Festival 2023. And so I explored the learnings from several workshops, what facilitation means to us, what we learn from our kids, what we learn from our bodies, our emotions, about process, about conflict, and neurodiversity. So stay tuned and listen to Becky Sawle, Sonja Sinz, Mirjam Leunissen, Célia Rene Corail, Etrit Shkreli, and Marianne as they explore with me the edges of facilitation. Enjoy. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, scroll down to the show notes to download my free 1-page summary. And now, enjoy. Hello, Becky.
Hello, Mirjam.
Welcome on the show. You're the first one to visit my podcasting boat.
Oh, here, where's my heart?
Hugging.
I'll give it a yay. Give it a yay.
Beautiful.
Yes. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes. And we're meeting here at the NeverDoneBefore Festival 2023.
I know.
What brought you here and what are your insights so far? What would you like to share?
This is an amazing place where I get to encounter people from all around the world that I would probably not normally meet. They all bring something rich and amazing. I have attended 2 sessions so far. I was greeted by a unicorn and a jester. I love how costumes create a safe place to tap into our creativity. And I just finished Clash of the Goddesses, where I learned about Kali and Athena and used those to lean into conflict and how to embrace or new strategies to embrace conflict in workshops.
How do you usually relate to, is conflict something that comes up in your workshops, in your work?
Yes. Not always, but I think the most difficult workshops are the ones where the reason for the workshop is that different teams, different perspectives are clashing. And the purpose is to try to understand and build resolution, identify opportunities to improve things.
And well, I have a little bit more context about you than the audience has. But if I'm not mistaken, you facilitate in-house.
Yes, very recently, up until very recently, I would facilitate in-house approximately 100 workshops a year.
Wow, that's massive.
Yes.
And I wonder, because when you're in-house, so you know colleagues, you know the organization, you know the culture. So dealing with conflict as a facilitator in this context puts you kind of in the same boat. So I wonder how easy or difficult it is to then have the distance and really help the group to navigate that.
That's a great insight. And I was based in the technology organization, but was very comfortable leading with, I'm not a technologist. I took this opportunity because tech touches everyone in the company. And I think when the technology folks knew that I wasn't trying to compete, someone who would code or identify the best system, etc., I could really become almost invisible, neutral. And then my belief was to build strong bonds of trust with everybody so that everybody felt I could be their ally. And then I think it's really important, the planning team, to have a representative from each voice or each perspective that's going to be attending. And we would get better results because there was more trust going into the workshop if all the voices were at the planning table.
Yeah, so making sure that what I find interesting what you just said is that everyone has the impression that you're their ally. And I think this is a real gift and a challenge because you don't want to be everyone's darling. So you don't want to compromise, but still to hold that tension while remaining neutral.
Yes, yes. It takes energy. It takes energy to try to find the good in others. Something I encountered in 2016 was an assessment that was built from the Gallup research, Gallup polls. I don't know how global that is, but the Clifton Strength Finders. And understanding my strengths, and individuality is one of my strengths. And so I think that natural strength really is something I can leverage as a facilitator to quickly understand or to try to embrace what's good about each person in the workshop. And then try to help move them into a place of feeling safe to participate. And yeah, I can think probably my most memorable workshop where I also had to call into my parenting skills. I'm a mom of 5 kids, and I think that also helps as a facilitator at times. I had 2 male colleagues that became very angry with each other. Like I really felt that it was almost like the 2 kids fighting in the backseat of the car. And I had unknowingly put them in the same breakout room, and they were arguing. And I joined the group. I remember physically, they were working in front of a whiteboard on wheels. And I ended up coming into the group, coming physically in between them and adopting a position of, I kneeled down on the floor to make myself smaller. And then I started listening and asking, okay, what do you think? What do you think? Inscribing that and moved the energy towards the activity. So, and didn't act threatening, didn't stand at their level, bodily changed levels to try to diffuse.
And that requires such a degree of humility to go on your knees and to make yourself small in service for the group or the participants. And then I think, especially as a woman with 2 male colleagues,
yes.
Was this something that came intuitively, or was it from your motherhood, or did you learn that somewhere?
It's a great question. It just seemed to be, it just felt right. So maybe it was more intuitive. I, years later, had one of those same participants in a workshop this year. And it was a storytelling workshop where there were 50 people roughly had to get up and present a story or use storytelling to share in front of the whole group. And he was very uncomfortable and did a wonderful job. And later we hugged. And it just was really powerful because I will always carry this earlier memory of this very stark conflict that startled me. Actually, it was so strong. So maybe it was intuitive. Maybe it was just dealing with how many kids' conflicts. I don't know with children if I would have necessarily adopted a different stance to diffuse. I think as a parent, you feel that you retain authority over your kids, or at least you like to think that you do.
What else have you learned from being a mother about being a facilitator?
All 5 of my kids are extraordinarily different and wonderful in their own ways, but very, very different. And I think each workshop I approached as its own unique microcosm. Most of the time, the people that wanted to hold the workshop couldn't articulate why or what they wanted to produce as a result. It could be very vague. And so a big piece was the strategic consulting to understand, to try to help articulate a sentence. We always would start with why. And then what do you want to produce as a result? What do you want to hold in your hands that you don't have today? And then what's the level of trust of the people coming? And, many times just based on that answer that you would get, that would tell you a lot. And so most workshops we planned in 3 45-minute sessions was the time there was work done in between those. So I think as a parent, recognizing people's differences and people that have natural empathy and people that empathy is like one of the last things that crosses their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that one is better than the other. They're just wired very differently.
Beautiful. And I now can also relate to what you said earlier, that you can see I don't remember how you phrased it, but the beauty in everyone, although they're in conflict.
Yeah. People need to feel safe. And depending on, gosh, who only can imagine what's going on in people's private lives, right? This conflict workshop, right? What was your earliest memory of conflict? And things are happening in a workplace where we're sharing responsibility. It could be murky. Things are always in change. They're always in fluid motion. And if there's not open dialogue to clarify, we can have this, or we try and it gets misunderstood, or people feel their authority is being threatened, or could be many, many, many things. And so those are probably some of the most challenging workshops. And yet I find those to be the most invigorating. Team building is always fun and you can get very creative, but I think it takes some real skill to invite teams that are in conflict and they're acknowledging that we're hurting and we're not even confident that anything good is going to come from this. And this is probably going to be a waste of my time. And I really don't want to be here. How can I move and weave all of that into something positive? And so that it, not just some feel it was positive, but all can participate and feel that, yes, together we did this. Together we made it better.
Yeah. And it's a difficult task. And as you say, if we achieve that, well, that's the high art of facilitation. And since you mentioned the workshop, I loved the check-in question, which was, what toast would you raise to conflict? And I found this so inspiring because what it brought up for me, and that relates to what you just said, was the potential that conflict has to bring relationships to a deeper level.
Yes.
And also the opportunity through conflict to then decide, is this relationship worth to go to this deeper level? Or is it conflict maybe the opportunity to just turn around and say, maybe I don't need that?
Yeah, right. There comes a time for that too.
Yeah.
And I also think in a work setting, do you know the children's story, The Emperor's New Clothes?
Oh, yes.
So you can have leaders who are espousing whatever that they strongly believe in. And yet there's definitely cases where others are not agreeing, but out of fear, oh, yes, Emperor, you look magnificent. And who has the courage to say, Emperor, you're naked? And so I do feel that conflict can bubble under the surface. And it's healthy when we can get to a place where we say, this is really causing too much time, too many mistakes, too much frustration. And let's be clear and courageous to put it on the table and invite an opportunity to unpack it and look it in the face and enable, hopefully, safe, respectful conversations about not just arguing about it, but pulling back, understanding, and then asking ourselves, okay, what might we do differently to make this better?
Yeah. And inside it, because I would think that a facilitator can be this courageous person telling the emperor that actually they don't have clothes on. Is this possible within an organization to be this courageous person?
Yes. And, it's maybe there's more ways than one to get the message across, right? So maybe you just avoid the emperor for a while. Maybe you work with some of the people under the emperor. Yeah, I can't think of any emperor that came to me and said, hey, I'd like a workshop. But a lot of people under an emperor did. Well, I take that back. I remember a workshop where the team came and said, we have so many critical things we have to get done, and we're missing our deadlines, and we're making mistakes, and we don't have time to do the rework. So that was the opening challenge. We're going to do a workshop to get our arms around this. Okay. So I said, well, what do you have to get done? It was an Excel spreadsheet of literally 300 things. And I said, wow, this is a lot of things. What are the most urgent? They're all urgent.
Smells like overwhelm.
Yes. And the dynamic was that no one could say safely, we can't do all of this. We don't feel safe to have an honest conversation about what truly is a priority. And so this was obviously leading this team to a very negative place. So over a series of workshops, it was really exciting. They got to a place where we started to naturally move things into categories. Where do you feel very confident that you have the resources and you can achieve this by the deadline? Where are you quite confident that you can't, and why? And then what's falling in the middle, that gray zone? Again, like a children's story, almost like Goldilocks, right? We separate things into the big bowl, the Papa Bear, the medium bowl, the Mama Bear, the little bowl, the baby bear, just into 3 chunks, right? Simplify. So we're very confident about this. We're very sure that this is a mess, and I'm not really sure what to do about the stuff in the middle. But that allowed us to start to have conversations around why and what would need to change. So the health of the organization, people were very fearful of the vice president. And over the course of, I think, probably 3 different workshops, we moved the culture with language and understanding about how we could, have healthy conversations about the work and what it would take and the deadlines. So that's exciting to empower that.
Yeah. And I can recognize maybe another thing you learned through being a mother, this weaving stories into making out of stories metaphors that would describe a situation and therefore easier to digest and to relate to.
Yes, analogies all the time, taking the complex and simplifying it and using stories and yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful because everyone can relate to them somehow. And then immediately we have a picture in front of us and maybe even a warm feeling because it reminds us of childhood.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you, Becky.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking questions.
Hello. Welcome to the podcast boat.
So exciting.
Yeah, good to see you back, Sonja. What has emerged for you at the festival for now?
For now, I have been struggling with my technical setup a little bit. I had my monitors go blank. I had a blue screen pop up. And I'm asking myself, because I believe there's good reasons for things as they are. So what might be the message there? Maybe there's the hidden message like, Sonja, you've been on that screen for way too much recently. Maybe you should take a break. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying the energy of the festival. And I think this is also what makes it so special, that it's kind of that tribe that you come into and people just behave in a certain way with each other. And this, I think, is so precious.
And what do you mean by in a certain way so that you recognize your tribe?
It's in a respectful, lighthearted, collegial way, I would say.
And this makes me very curious because some things I have the impression sometimes are even unspoken. So you tap into a space and there's a sort of energy that makes you feel safe or not safe. Can you put it into words? Because I struggle to put my finger on it or what it is.
Absolutely. And you know what? As time goes by and as I kind of mature as a facilitator, I get asked by people, what is it that you do to create the spaces you create? What is your secret sauce? What's the magic ingredient? And I think it's not one single thing that you do. It's more like the combination of opening up really and showing up as a whole person and being present and not having immediate reactions to things. So not immediately judging everything that you hear. Oh, this is good. This is bad. This is so, this is so. Just like, okay, yeah, welcome. Welcome to the party.
Yeah.
What do you think it is?
Yeah, it is maybe this openness. This openness that everyone is, the default is curiosity about others' perspectives. And I think it's also maybe a way that as facilitators, we learn to listen and to ask questions.
Yeah. Yeah, and to listen on so many levels. You know, there's the obvious level of listening to the other people, but then there is this meta level of listening to what wants to emerge as a pattern. And then there is this listening to self level where you say, okay, how am I reacting to this now? Why am I reacting to this? Like, what does it trigger me, or what does it evoke in me? And that's what I think is so fascinating, this dance between the different levels of listening.
Yes. And thank you for mentioning the trigger points, because that's what I find so fascinating in being in other people's workshops. So to put the participant hat on as a facilitator, because we have our way of doing. And then to be in so many different workshops with such short time between them really confronts us to how are we doing things and how open are we to other ways of doing. Without judging, but still sensing that, there's a certain discomfort.
Yeah, exactly. Sensing the tension, but then having the freedom to decide what to do with that tension.
Yeah.
And I think that is, for me personally, that was a massive development, not to necessarily need to do something when I feel a tension. Like 2-3 years back, I would have then try to channel it somewhere or make a suggestion or take over the lead or whatever. But now I can just be and say, okay, there's this tension between what could be or how I would do it and how it is being done now. And that's okay. And I can sit with that.
Beautiful. How did you learn that? What has happened in these 2-3 years?
Oh, a lot. So I was on a facilitator training program by an institute in Berlin. And that had quite a bit of self-experience on the agenda, especially about feelings and being with feelings and fully feeling your feelings as well. That was really uncomfortable in places, but that needed to happen. And through that training program, I have become more rounded as a person and as a facilitator, and I can be with more feelings than I was comfortable with before. So things for me like, I don't know, sadness, I could hardly bear, or also shame was difficult. I didn't want people to lose their face. But now I am more able to juggle all of these different emotions.
And what I hear is when you say, I didn't want people to lose face, there's this helper syndrome. We need to fix it. We need that I think many, especially beginner facilitator have. And
absolutely.
I had that as well. I can remember at the beginning of Never Done Before, how cringe sometimes I was sitting in a workshop from someone else because I had my understanding of how a workshop had to be. And then feeling other people feeling, believing that I could.
Yeah, exactly. And being in charge of other people's feelings. Yeah.
Yes,
But how did you overcome that?
I think similarly to learn to feel feelings. And it's so funny because I realized that it sounds so natural, but somehow I think many of us have unlearned it along the way, because as a child we've been, shamed or punished for being angry, being sad. Don't do this in public. Don't feel that. And I think to allow ourselves, to allow myself that all these feelings are welcome and that I don't necessarily have to do something with it, but then I can let go, right? First need to feel it and then we can let it go.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing when you let that go and you are more relaxed in yourself, I feel that this invites more people to open up more deeply again. It's a little bit like being magnetic suddenly.
Absolutely. And that's the other thing that came to my mind as I heard you speaking before is that through your journey, you became more grounded as a facilitator because you don't have to react anymore all the time. And I think what you just said, that it spills over to the group because you don't judge them. Because I think in the moment where you think that you feel their feelings, you're basically, putting a judgment out.
Yeah, and you kind of take it on you to be able to gauge what they can bear or cannot bear. Yeah. And I think this is kind of patronizing, isn't it? To say, yes. I'm not asking you that question because I think you might break into tears when you answer that question. And I think you couldn't bear that. So I keep that question from you, but I know the question would be helpful for the process. Yeah. So things like that.
Beautiful. It reminds me that in the beginning, so I always, now it's second nature. Always start with the turn to your neighbor moment. And I remember in the very beginning, there were moments where I hesitated or I wouldn't do a certain activity because I would think, maybe the group wouldn't like it or they would judge me. And I realized that by not trusting them to go there, I actually did something to the space. And by trusting that they can handle it, they will grow into it.
It's a little bit that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
So I was wondering, Mirjam, what is your next learning opportunity nowadays? Because you have done so much, you have achieved so much, you've worked with gazillions of different people and groups. What is your big thing now?
Thank you for asking. My big thing is the co-creation for not only a Never Done Before workshop, but for a course or for client work. So what I enjoy doing at the moment a lot is to put together A teams of facilitators and then having a shared goal. So we are co-creating now a course, the 6 of us, and with a group of 5, we're working on a training program for a client. And it's exactly the dance between emergence and structure that we and process that we just discussed in the workshop that I find fascinating, because I think it's extremely confronting to co-create something for a client or a paying customer with a group of people you've not collaborated before and where there's so many different perspectives and methods and ideas coming in. But it's an incredible learning journey.
Wow. Do you have set roles in that team or is it like free floating?
It is free floating. Yeah, wow. I think in my nature, I'm an anarchist, so I'm not a big fan of hierarchy. Although, and that's another growth moment, going into leadership and how to, because I think what I learned is, as a good leader, we have to take space to make space. So we have to create that structure and these guidelines and boundaries, and then amazing things emerge. Yeah. And for you?
Oh, different things. I have the feeling that I'm living different lives at the moment.
All at once?
Yeah, in phases. But, I've started a social business, which is the workshop barn here in the village where I live at. So converting a former barn into a 2-floor workshop space, basically a Sonja playground. But I want this to be a space that is kind of a palpable utopia for what living and working in a small village can be like. So I want to share that space with other people. It shall not only be good for my business, but also for the villagers. So we will have anything there that fits to my values and the kind of future I would like to create. So be it, yoga lessons or meditation, of course, workshops on different topics, but also repair workshop evenings or writing the chronicle of the village together or something like that.
And how, because I also see this tension between emergence and structure and leadership, because you have your vision and you're creating the physical space. And then how do you navigate the space between letting the villagers come in, emerge and create whatever they need while following your own vision and mission?
Yeah, I think the guardrails are the guiding principles and the values. So for me, it's anything that is based upon the assumption that, all people are equally valuable and equally important, based on the assumption that sharing is better than keeping things to yourself, and similar to what you also have with the principles and the values in the NDB community. I think it's really important to have these guardrails and then to have also conversations with people who would like to rent the space for something and say, okay, what's the purpose of this event that you're planning? What's the outcome going to be? How are people going to feel there? How do you want them to behave? And then to also be very clear about what's not okay. And I think it will be a process of finding that as well.
Ooh, can you think of a red flag? So what would be a...
Yeah, definitely. No. So political right-wing stuff will not happen in that barn.
Yeah. And what are the red flags that are maybe rather pink flags? So not so obvious and...
Yeah, maybe things that are excluding certain people just because. Yeah, we would have to see. Or massive alcohol consumption. Drugs is probably something I also wouldn't like. Yeah, it will be a finding process. And I think there will be pitfalls and there will be setbacks, but that's part of the process.
Yeah, beautiful emergence.
Mm-hmm.
And since we came out of the emergence workshop, which I found interesting, were 40 people, and it was basically a large group conversation about process and emergence. What did you take away from that?
Actually, my screen went black about halfway through.
No.
So I was left off, I think, somewhere in the middle of that workshop. I was relaxed throughout the whole workshop, but I think the results could have been a bit more substantial with a bit more process. I think the pendulum was a little bit far into the horizontal space and leaving it very open. And I would have done it differently, but I was okay to sit with that and to take part nonetheless.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how also we need, as a facilitator, more or less structure. It's funny that you say that. So, for instance, I co-facilitated recently with a colleague, and I love to have my templates. I have my process, so I'm very structured. And he is the exact opposite. It's full emergence.
Yeah.
We don't plan for anything, and we deal with whatever comes up in the room.
Ooh.
And this was a very interesting growth process to find the middle ground.
So he moved a little bit and you moved a little bit, and then you met on the... Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So from the way I design my workshops nowadays is I leave a lot more room for things to emerge in the beginning. And I think that's common with a lot of facilitators. In the beginning, I was much too optimistic on what can be done in what kind of amount of time. So like my workshops used to be like boot camps of now we do this, now we do that, now we do that. So I have more lofty agendas nowadays. And also I really like this double diamond design that you go for divergent, convergent, divergent, convergent. That really does something. And also to call it out and to say, now we're opening up things. And now we're entering a phase where we want things to show up. So speak from your heart and be open. That really helps. But sometimes people are scared of emerging things as well. So it's important, I think, to give that safety net to say whatever we open up, we will also be able to come to very tangible, very safe and concrete results in the end.
Which is a big challenge for many. So this needs structure and process.
Yes. Yeah.
Because then to leave the group, I think there's almost nothing worse for a group to leave them hanging with too many ideas.
Oh, yes.
Converging.
Oh, yeah. Or with just opening a can of worms, all the conflicts finally spoken out, and then, we only have 10 minutes left. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and conflict is even worse. And just ideas, opening up all the ideas and then not having an opportunity or even the next steps for how to implement them, where to go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's probably the one thing to whatever happens in between the messy middle. Leave 1.5 hours at the end to sort things out, to have that. So what?
Yeah. Depends on how long the entire workshop is, right?
Yeah. If it's only half an hour, then there you go.
So for a full day workshop, you would leave 1.5 hours?
Yeah, I would definitely. Yeah. And I love overnight workshops. So a day and a half or 2 days, because really I believe in the magic that happens overnight when you sleep over a thought or an insight.
Yes, absolutely. And I think especially before taking decisions, because there are endorphins and hormones we are generating in a workshop because we're in conversation and the ideas flow. And I think very often we underestimate the impact of that and that the decisions that are taken in this action, or because everyone is tired and just wants this to end. Let's just take a decision and then it's over.
Exactly, like being held hostage somewhere. Come on, now let me free. I agree to anything. Yeah, it's a little bit like the dust in a snowball. It needs to settle. It needs to rest overnight.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, something's pinging. I think it's time for the next workshop already.
Thank you, Sonja, for joining me on this boat.
Yeah, thank you very much. And see you soon.
See you soon. See you at the workshop. Bye. Hello, Mirjam. Welcome on the podcasting boat.
Hello.
How is the festival for you? What's an insight you had from your session or another session or in general?
Yeah. First observation that it's such an amazing space because people are so generous and just being vulnerable in their own reflections and also in reflecting back to others. And I always find new puzzle pieces of myself in the festival, getting clear on what am I and what am I not.
What do you mean?
Like really experiencing what does and does not resonate with me and where my own strengths lie. So in my own sessions, I notice the elements that I really enjoy and come naturally, and I notice the elements that are challenging for me. And this is actually one of the things that are really nice from the co-creation process, that you are not just following your own flow, but you're doing this together with your co-creator. So there's also challenging areas that are less familiar to me. And in other people's sessions, there's also stuff that really just doesn't resonate with me. And that's just as insightful as the stuff where I'm fully engaged, actually.
And what do you think that is? And I would like to come back to two things that you said. One is everyone is so generously sharing and open. What makes this happen? And the other question that came up is, how do you know what resonates and what does it do for you in your facilitation practice to know that? Why is it important?
Okay, let's do them one by one. So why does this happen in this space? There's a lot to the session design, I think. So they really leave it open to a lot of self-reflection, exploration, going slow, taking time for the experience to really feel into it and to share with others. So very engaged, right? It's not people trying to teach you something. It's really about your own self-discovery journey and sharing that in the space with others. And apparently this community attracts the right kind of people, right? That are open to this kind of vulnerability, bringing your full self, taking risks and being generous. And that's overall just a very positive vibe.
Yeah, nice. So the guiding principles seem to work. Of the generosity and the taking the risk to be vulnerable and open.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we see all of our beauty and we see all of our struggles and we realize that they are pretty similar for everybody, which is very connecting.
What do you mean? Tell me more.
Like seeing your own talents, your own strengths, believing in yourself, all these things. So others really see what is unique about you that you bring to the space, and it's so hard to see it for yourself. And then it's wonderful when you get this mirrored back.
And at the same time, recognizing that everyone struggles to see that and everyone suffers a little bit from imposter.
Yes. Yeah. And that in itself is already very empowering. Like, oh, it's not just me. It's not everybody else has figured it out. It's not just me who sometimes is a little bit groping around in the dark. It's normal.
Yeah. And what I hear is then also, you said generously sharing and that the sessions are designed in that sense. And it sounds as if they're really embracing the principle of being in service for the group instead of lecturing, teaching, promoting.
The sessions I've been in, yes, there's a lot of just creating the space and the boundaries to play with, to then go off on your own exploration.
Yeah. And how does it help or serve your own practice? You mentioned that it's as helpful to be in a session that resonates as to be in one that doesn't.
Yeah. So there was a session about setting a goal and getting there. And I felt so much resistance with this kind of goal setting, because I realized when I do that, it takes away all of my playfulness, because then I suddenly feel I have to be very specific about how I get to my goal and what steps to take. So initially I felt a lot of resistance. It didn't resonate with me. But then the beautiful insight is that my empowering trait is my playfulness, to lean into that, and then stuff emerges from that. So maybe, don't pin myself down on these goals. So letting go of the attachment to a specific outcome, which could be very empowering. And then later I also realized there is something to setting the goal, not in the sense of then being clear about the path to get there, but to just believe this is already reality now. So I was thinking of, then and then I'm coaching people with embodiment, and I'm making this much money, and I'm going to have my ideal life. And then I was like, but I am that already.
Yay!
So it was very revealing.
Yeah.
Like, why don't I just start now?
Beautiful. And I do believe in the power of the law of attraction, as woo-woo as it sounds. But I think there is a power in being clear on where you want to go, and then just leaving it be and not getting attached to it. And then somehow magically stuff happens, because unconsciously we take the steps towards that goal, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me the magic is in having the direction, but not getting focused on the point, so that you're open to what happens in your periphery, because that's where, the opportunities arise that you would never think of yourself.
Yeah, it's like a horse that has, how do you call that in English?
Blinders.
The blinders, yeah. That if you get too focused on one number or one thing, you don't see what happens around you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me, it's finding the balance between the two. Because I think when I set a very specific goal, I tend to put on the blinders to just get there. Mm-hmm. And then I lose the playfulness, which allows me to look outside the blinders and see what's happening around me, and to just jump in and enjoy that.
Yeah, and that's your signature, right? That's the way how you facilitate, with playfulness and creativity and costumes.
Yeah, and then the crazy thing is that I have to remind myself sometimes, right? So,
yeah. And you have, over the course of the last 2 years, co-facilitated with many different community members. And this year again with someone new. What have you learned from these different co-facilitation projects?
Yeah. They're all different, and they all come with their own challenges. So is there a perfect match? I don't think so. And I'm learning from every single one of them, even the ones that are which I would find very challenging because the style is so different. It opens my approach, right? So, you can also do this differently. And it really helps in fluidity, I think, letting go of your own reflexes in some sense to do it a particular way, to just gain more tools, not literally tools, but more things you can fall back on when you need a different approach. So and it also taught me to make things very explicit, because I showed up thinking, obviously we agree on this and that. And then somewhere in the process you find out you do not. So to really start speaking everything out early on, and taking nothing for granted, not assuming anything.
That's
very beautiful in the co-creation process. And I always end up with a very different session than I would have had if I had created it alone for that particular audience with that particular purpose in mind.
And how do you negotiate the boundaries? So how much is your signature or your style, and how much is the other one? How do you find that balance? Because I can imagine that it's a challenge.
Yeah, I don't negotiate. I don't. I just don't do that. No, I think this is a lot of gut feeling, because what I get out of the co-creation is not necessarily what percentage of the session plan was my idea. Right?
It's not a transaction.
So it could be that maybe in the end, there are many more ideas of the other person in it, but then I really learned a lot in the co-creation process, and then it's very valuable for me, right? So then why would I push back on that? So I think the learning can be in many different places, or what I want to get out of it. Like, yes, do I really want to bring something specific to a group of people? Then I will push a little harder to get it on the agenda. But if I'm more open in what it might be, then there might be a lot of learning in the creation process, actually, which is just as valuable. Actually, I find the whole lead up to the session more of a learning experience than the actual session itself by the time I host it.
Yeah, because isn't it funny that there's no one way of facilitation? And we often only realize when we suddenly are in this space, as you described, that we realize, oh, not everyone does it like this. Yeah.
And so it's about skills, I think. It's about what people are comfortable with. So the hosts themselves, they have their own comfort zones and they're clumsy in other areas. And blind spots. So I notice, for instance, I'm less comfortable in hosting a big group conversation because I feel a little bit at a loss as how to navigate all of that. And I feel like a fish in the water when it comes to letting people do things with their bodies, like embodiment. And I noticed then in other facilitators that they miss stuff there to really make it an embodied experience. Like, how do you guide people in this? And for me, it comes naturally. And for another, it's a blind spot. And vice versa for the conversations.
And that was an insight for me in your session last night with Yaniv. And also at the festival, in the conversation with other participants, that we realize how much we miss actually by not addressing the body of our participants, and that we totally forget that in our processes. So what is your approach? And maybe let's start with the beginning. What does embodiment actually mean? And how do you help participants to bring their bodies into the session?
Yeah. So embodiment, you can give many different definitions of that. One of them is being aware as the body, as contrasted with seeing the body as just a hunk of meat, right? As a physical object, or seeing the body, or contrasted with being aware of the body, which you might be if you're doing a yoga practice. Yes, you know what you're doing with your body, but you may not be aware as your body. Sensing, it's the felt experience of your surroundings in your body, which then helps you make sense of what's going on outside of you and inside of you, and being intentional about how you respond to that.
And by that, you mean gut feeling, comfort level, tickling?
Everything. So it's gut feeling, it's comfort zone, it's fight, flight, freeze. It's your values. Are you connected to your values? You feel your values. You feel when something goes against your values, right? It's a gut feeling. It's like, I cannot go there. It's not right for me. And it's not a pros and cons lists in your mind. It's a feeling. And also bringing into the world how you want to be. It's also that. Do I want to be confident, step into the world, showing myself, taking space? Then you have to embody that. Use your body, take the body language, the postures that embody these qualities.
Can you give an example?
An example would be, so I think the people we can always think of is the people just that have this very wise, grounded presence, like the Dalai Lama, maybe Nelson Mandela. There is something in how they carry themselves that looks very grounded, maybe a bit dignified. And it's in how they show up, how they move, how they look.
And now I'm curious, does it come from a mindset that is grounded and confident? Or is it the body, how they hold themselves that then reinforces their confidence?
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
Not that easy.
Nothing is easy. No, it's actually very easy. It's a two-way street. So if you feel frightened, you're not gonna look very confident, right? Your body language will speak fear. And you can also use it the other way around. So you can also adjust your posture to open, to not collapse with the fear, but to open and to get your feet solidly on the ground, to regulate your breathing, to calm down the system so that you get out of this fear. And then you're using your body to become grounded and confident. So it goes two ways.
Yeah, and that's what I realized in your session earlier, where we were embodying archetypes and then see either the resistance in our bodies, like, oh, this doesn't feel comfortable. So I think this is what you meant when it's not aligned to your values, or that you have this gut feeling. And other times like, oh, this feels good. This feels empowering.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can also use the embodiments to explore what your habits are, right? What is your habitual way of being? So if it's being humble, taking a stance where you radiate a lot of authority, taking space, dominating people, it will feel pretty unfamiliar probably. And the humble poses will feel very familiar. You will feel very comfortable in it. Doesn't mean one is right or wrong, but it tells you something about what is your normal way of being. And you can develop the other by finding this comfort, by practicing these other postures that they can become familiar. It's also like crossing your arms. If you cross your arms, you will always do it the way that feels familiar. If you do them the other way, it's like, oh, this doesn't feel right. And it's just a habit.
So how do you use this then in your practice? Because earlier I had someone on the boat and we talked about the fact that it's very difficult to actually get certain groups to get into their bodies because it would be immediately considered as woo-woo or overly spiritual. So what is the small, sneaky step that you can take to make it easier for groups?
I think there are different ways. So you could take the rational way to explain it, like you're used to a certain way in responding, right? It's like playing tennis. You always hit the ball a certain way, which always leads to the same results. So now we practice hitting it another way and you get a different outcome. So just by moving differently, you also start to think differently and you get different outcomes. The other way is so I believe I just somehow make people feel comfortable by being grounded and present and really feeling through my own body myself. And then people are willing to step into the experience, to just try it. And once you experience it, you start to realize what's going on. And you can do little tricks like starting small and really making it your own. So I think part of what I do is that I give them the permission to really make it their own. It doesn't need to look like anything. It can be very big. It can be very small. It can be just changing the way you look. It can be moving one finger. So that you start with something that's close to what you feel comfortable with. And then it can grow from there.
So this means not immediately getting everyone off their chairs, but telling them to start wherever they are, to meet them where they are.
Yes, absolutely. It's the same as with, I would say, any other good facilitation practice, like not telling people what to do, but creating the conditions in which they feel safe to explore that space and then find their own experience in it. And through experiencing it, you find the value in it, right? And not because someone else tells you that it's good for something.
Yeah, this usually doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
So what's your experience? What is maybe transformation is too big of a word, but what is the shift that you observe then in the groups that you facilitate?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is the nonverbal troika, where people go in very skeptical. So the troika consulting is where you come together in a group of 3. One shares a challenge that they are dealing with, and the other 2 then have a conversation among the 2 to give advice in some way. I do it without speaking. So people only express themselves in movement and poses and facial expressions. And I think people show up very skeptical. This is never going to work. And then at the end, you just see the delight because everybody feels so seen and heard and understood, and no words were exchanged. And for many people, this is a transformative experience, realizing that we don't need that many words.
And I wonder whether, because it's so easy to hear judgment in words and to take things personally, because the spoken word has so many meanings to us, and we easily get very defensive. And when we can express ourselves without words, then we take the option away of feeling judged.
Yes, I think there's less room for misunderstanding in some sense, because you're not going to have a fight over what is exactly meant by a particular word. And this is another thing that now comes to mind. I think in the end, the way we empathize when someone shares something with us is by actually imagining what it would be like for us to be in the situation and the way you would feel, and you actually sense it in your body, how you respond to this image in your mind. And that's how you empathize. If you take away the words, you just have the direct interaction through the mirror neurons, where you feel, oh, when a person moves like this, it feels like that.
And there's only empathy without judgment.
Yeah.
And I think you don't even assume that you would understand or need to understand.
Yeah.
Especially when people come in with skepticism.
Yeah. And maybe it's less relevant to know about the situation, but just to know what a person is feeling, right?
Mm.
Instead of knowing what they are dealing with, and would you have the same issues in that same situation? Maybe it's just enough to acknowledge that, oh, I see that you're feeling sad.
And this reminds me of, we cognitively know that we don't enjoy receiving unsolicited advice or solutions, especially from someone who doesn't really understand, because they haven't had time to really understand. So what I hear from your method and the nonverbal troika is you put all these restrictions in to take away any assumptions, any expectations, until you get to the very essence, which is just express yourself how you feel.
Yeah, and then being seen in that.
Yeah.
And sometimes when people mirror back or do respond in movement, people find it insightful, because in the response in the movement, they will read what they need, right? It's not the advice in words. It's what they will read into it, what they need. It's like mirroring their own unconscious. Now it starts to sound very esoteric, and I think it's actually quite scientifically grounded.
And tell me more. Tell us more.
I totally believe that frequently in our unconscious, we know what we need, or we know the answers, and it's more about becoming aware of them and giving ourselves permission to see it, to acknowledge it. And then when it's brought out explicitly, visibly, by someone else showing us, reflecting it back, then you actually become aware of what you already knew.
And it sounds as if it's speaking to our deepest, most pure instincts as a baby, when we didn't have words, where everything was just the exchange of body language and glance, basically.
Yeah. And we made sense of the world through just feeling, experiencing it, right? Touching stuff, trying stuff. There were no words. This is how we made sense of the world. And on top of that, we built all of our other concepts. And this is, so we can open a whole other box here. This is reflected in how we use our language, right? So something positive is up, something negative is down. There's all these references to the physical, tangible world.
And then if we look down, that's why being on the cell phone is so bad for our mood, because we're constantly looking up and have this submissive pose almost, instead of the open, proud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will make you feel bad if you spend a lot of time in the pose. There's all this research, right, where they let people smile and then they actually feel happier after.
Yeah.
And I now acquired a language of 26 poses that can bring out all of these different moods just by taking the pose. So you can shift into a mood where you feel more powerful, or into a mood where you're more caring, or into a mood where you feel more playful. And you only need to take a pose for like a minute and it already shifts something in you.
Yeah. I think we got a little bit of a glimpse into it in your session. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this glimpse with us.
Yeah.
I hope to hear more at another time.
Yes. There's so much to unpack around this.
Yes, I can tell. Needs more time.
Yeah.
So I see you back. Thank you. Hello, Célia. Welcome on the show.
Hello.
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 So, what came up in the last session for you?
Oh, that session was awesome. That session was refreshing. It's my first session of the day after a very busy day, I would say. And yeah, it was definitely refreshing. And I'm still here looking for, I don't know, more connection and more.
What are you taking away from the last session?
What I take away? It's someone. So I have this. So the theme was about being weird and weirdness in general. And yeah, I think I have food for thought for myself as a facilitator, because I think my superpower is my ability to show, okay, you can be weird and it's okay to be weird. It's more than okay. It's actually beneficial for your thinking and your creativity. And my takeaway is, at some point I realized that we have this conversation about, okay, when do you feel your weirdness limits you? And I found some ways to actually overcome that. Someone told me, like, someone reframed and said, okay, you know what? So I will start by the beginning. I was like, okay, I feel that I'm in another space. I'm already out of the box and people are in the box and I need to join them where they are. And this person I did, yes, you go in the box and you take them with you. So that's my takeaway. That was really like the moment where, like, oh, actually it's that easy. It's not that you're not in the same space. You have to come and bring them. So the result is the same. Like, I can still be that facilitator for creativity. I just have to, it's not that difficult. I don't have to shut anything. I don't have to be less weird. I just have to bring people with me. But for that, I need to come in the box. And it's okay. See, so it's about boundaries, like boundaries I crossed, but boundaries I can cross back. I can cross in every way. There's no boundaries. So you can go back or you can go forward. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's how.
And
it's fresh in my mind. So maybe it's a bit messy, but yeah, that's how I feel it.
Yeah, and what I enjoyed about the session was to explore, as you said, the weirdness, and that we tend to shut it down, and how to embrace it and how can it be beneficial. So how does your weirdness show up in the facilitation that you usually do?
I think my weirdness is more my ability or my lack of fear to explore things. I'm not afraid to jump anywhere. Like, if you ask me, I'm a playful person, which is not weird, which is just being playful, but it's just the places where I'm willing to go, but might be weird for someone, for some people. So yeah, so how it shows is just like, I'm like, okay, let's go. The lack of fear, the willingness. That's how it might feel weird for people, but it doesn't feel weird for me. It just feel weird for others. But yeah.
And when you say that you're not fearful in your facilitation, for me, this sounds more like a superpower.
Yeah, it's definitely a superpower. It's more than that, actually. It's how I grew up, who I am, and what I want to be. So it's much more than that. I always said my mantra is, I want to show people how to dance in the rain. So that's really something I believe in, like, see the beauty of the rain on your skin. So it's so much more than the cold and being wet. It's something you could enjoy and you could learn to really dance into. So that's, it's more than a superpower. it's just who I am. So, I mean, if you come with me, you have to embrace it too. Like, if we go together, like, we will go under the rain at some point and dance.
And it's interesting because I hear so much of the facilitation skills in there. So going into the box to take them out, so to guide them the way, to help them to cross, maybe to go beyond their comfort zone. Exactly. And then helping them to see the positive and the negative. That's where innovation is, right?
Yeah, totally. That's exactly where innovation is. Innovation is where you can make connection with something, and something unexpected. Like, you made weird combination. That's exactly what innovation, that's the sweet spot where it begins, where you don't have any ideas. You feel uncomfortable. That's where it started. And then we are in another space, like something new, but it's not something from scratch. It's connection that you make. Like, it's the rain you already know, but you see it differently. All of a sudden, you don't see the rain as a threat. You see the rain as an opportunity, and etc. So that's how I see innovation. Like, you shift your mind and a problem becomes an opportunity.
And it sounds as if it's a switch that you can turn. And for many people, it's difficult. So what's your trick to help people to see the beauty in the dance in the rain? How do you get them to this innovative mindset?
So first, I'm an optimistic person, but every time people are like, oh yeah, but you're optimistic. And I'm like, okay, but like, I'm like you. So I have bad days, I have issues, I have like troubles, but it's just that it's a practice. I wake up and I practice being optimistic and see things in the good way. So it's just like, oh, I'm optimistic, and that's my superpower. Like, I not force myself, but with time, I think like I know how to shift and reframe all the time. So I think like most people, if you practice that, you practice it won't change the situation. Like, if you have, I don't know, a health issue, trouble, like, it won't make it disappear. It's not magic, but you could just practice. Okay, for 1 minute, what if it was different? What if I reframe it? What if I see the beauty? So the problem doesn't disappear, but you find solution to overcome this problem. So to me, it's practice. It's all about practice.
And do you do this then in your work with groups? Or how do you help them to be more innovative?
With group, I think it's first see the problem and reframe it, like, all the time. This is the way I do it. It's become natural, but I think I lead groups to face the problem, like, face it, like, face difficult. The emotion, face your feeling. It's okay. Like, don't think like, oh, it's not a problem. It's a problem. So face it. Let's look at it. Let's look at it from different angles, different perspectives. So I feel that's the third part. Put emotion on it, and then reframe it.
Can you give an example?
So that would be an example of facilitation, you mean?
Yeah, of this process you just described.
Oh, so but I have a process I have in mind. I work with an ONG about future thinking, future literacy. And so I grew up in an island called a Caribbean island of Martinique. And we have this big project where we want to re-energize people, and we want to help them to be more optimistic. And so I facilitate different sessions with them so we follow the process of future literacy. And the idea is that first, so we work on identity, the future of identity, for example, which is in an island where we had a huge past of slavery, a big topic, and there's still a big issue. And so it's super heavy. And I co-facilitate a session on future of identities. So we had this very heavy discussion where we discuss, okay, what is the identity? Let's talk about slavery. Let's talk about this heritage. Let's talk about everything that's all the, how do you say that? Like the injuries, like that we still have from slavery. That was a very heavy conversation. And then the idea is, okay, now we talk about it. Now we know we're feeling, like we acknowledge like the pain or the difficulties Martinique is a very diverse island. We have like many people from many colors, many background, etc., etc. And we acknowledge each other's perspective. And then we reframed. And the way we reframed it was by suggesting a different scenario and dive into the scenario and imagine different futures. The idea is that there's no one possibility. Innovation is it's not about having one solution. It's really having like different depth of possibilities, a huge range of possibilities. So we explore different futures and different possibilities. And the more we were exploring these futures, the more insights we took from these futures. And we bring them back into the present. And the idea is not that we could change the past or we could change the present. I mean, we can change the past, but we can still influence the present by bringing back some things we loved into this future. So it's a way to reframe our present. We don't change the problem. We don't change the past. We don't change the evidence, but we are able to envision a different future than the path that we have if we continue the same way.
Yeah, I love that. So, yeah. Thank you for sharing this, because what I hear is you cannot change the past and you can change how you feel about the present so that you can have a positive impact on the future.
Exactly. And you can also change how you feel about the past. I'm a genealogist. I always speak about that because I'm a passionate genealogist. And I think this ability to travel between all these, times helped me a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
The gong already rang, so it's time for my session at the Tiki Bar.
Yes. Thank you, Mirjam. That was really cool. I love talking with you.
Thank you.
And thank you for a beautiful festival. I can't wait for the next session.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Talk to you more later. Hello, Etrit. Welcome on the podcasting boat.
Hi, Mirjam.
I am surprised that you're still alive, to be very honest.
So am I, but you won't believe this. The last session was extremely relaxing.
So for those who are not at the festival, Etrit has just hosted 3 workshops, never done before workshops in a row.
Yes.
And my question is, what is the one thing that you have learned from this experience?
So something very funny happened during the last session. Something that I did in the first session, and that was meant because we put together these sessions and we designed them and everything, and they're meant for others, right? They're meant to bring out the best in the participants.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything stays with me, usually it's like, oh, next time I should change this, or next time I should do this better. This time, I don't know how it happened, and it could be the sense of feeling a little bit of drunk because of not having slept. But something that I said during the first session that I hosted, and it was about the relationship between Kali and Shiva, all of a sudden made perfect sense when I was talking about resistance.
Ooh.
I wasn't expecting the connection.
Tell us more about resistance in relationship to facilitation. What does it have to do with 2 Greek goddesses?
Yeah, except that they're Hindu goddess.
Oh, sorry. Hindu goddess.
God and a goddess. And so possibly it's very personal. So it's a very me problem. But there's this thing of coming up with these beautiful ideas and seeing them executed, but not like wanting to have more of them, or like these ideas being all in the head. And the difference between basically action, thought and action.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking and doing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like a tension that I've tried to explore for myself for a very long time, coming also from the academia and wanting this thing to I want it to make sense to people. I don't want it simply to be something that we think about in our heads. I want to see the impact, the effects in the real world, right? And then part of what I was doing in the session when talking about mythology was the fact that you see Kali, who is a goddess of time and destruction and rebirth, who's dancing all the time. Mm. And the dance signifies action. And she is dancing on the body of Shiva. And Shiva lies immovable. And the fact that he is not moving is a sign of mastery. So he's not influenced by all these thoughts or like anxieties or ideas, or like he is completely relaxed, right? That like in the state of acceptance. And that state of acceptance that actually at the same time means mastery of the inner turmoil. And it is Kali that pushes Shiva out of it. Mm. And for the transformation to happen, you actually need the action. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. And I was just thinking that mastery in the sense of not moving and being the platform on which others can stand and dance, also somehow the high art of facilitation, isn't it? Mastery of just being there, yes. Holding space somehow, maybe being the place.
Yeah.
Being the stage.
And this is resonating very much with we were talking about in the session with Dove, which was the first session of this festival. And he was coming from the way of the Tao and saying that actually, like in the ideal condition, he doesn't do anything. He simply holds space for emergence.
Beautiful.
Yes. Which in a way makes sense. And yet, like, it's not one thing, right? You need the tapping of the dancing feet on top of you for the
become a medium.
Yes.
You need the resonance.
The relationality.
Oh,
it's not one, it's not the other. It's how they interact together.
Yeah. And how have you have hosted 3 sessions almost in a row with 3 different co-facilitators. And so you're all part of the Never Done Before community, but still you're in very different parts of the world. And what have you learned from this experience of collaborating with different people on different topics about co-facilitation, and maybe about what kind of facilitator you are?
Yeah. So one of I feel like the most valuable lessons is that I agreed to the first collaboration because I was asked, and it was something actually that happened because of a conversation that we had during the Street Wisdoms in Amsterdam, of the retreat, of the NDB retreat. And it was like, I think we could do something together. And it was, yes, why not? Oh, yes, we definitely should do something together. And we started co-creating and like getting together and like really beating up this idea and putting it into shape. And by the time we were meeting with the mentors, we were almost halfway through the creation. And the mentors really helped us shape it, like give it its final form. But it was like a month and a half ago, that session was finished. And this is not usually my style. I'm the sort of person who, even in the very last minute, is involved in what's going to happen next. And this is exactly what happened with the second workshop. And this was built on previous experience. So there was tension, but there was also full trust because the two of us had done that before. And like we knew how to dance together. So there was the comfort of that. And indeed, in the end, the session was extremely rewarding. And then there was this one session when, also because of the distance, but also because of how frequently we had seen each other or not seen each other, I felt on the edge. So I'm trying to calm myself and tell myself, like, okay, this is a safe space. You can make mistakes. It doesn't have to be perfect. But it was, and again, this is something that came out during the resistance workshop. It's how strongly the emotions still impact, like, even though you do all the cognitive work of calming yourself down, and yourself is saying, yeah, sure, yes, I understand, of course. And then when you don't expect it, it's
yeah.
So interesting dynamics, yes.
Did you have the impression that and I love that you say that, because it's so important that we feel safe when we facilitate. And I think having experience to co-facilitate with someone else. It's like a dancing partner, right? Because it's a dance of trust. You can throw the ball to each other. You maybe have some jokes and the chemistry is different. Do you have the impression that it's spilled over to the group somehow? Did it impact the group?
I think so. One of the things that I feel I do well is sort of understand, like have a sense of what's going on, even when it's really not going well. And sometimes I tell myself that I'm projecting, but sometimes I do really sense that the ease and the calm and the enjoyment, the delight that the facilitator feels gets picked up. Like, again, perhaps it's not that resonance at the cognitive level, but it's definitely at the emotional level. And I have this image now in my head, probably because you said resonance, of these glasses that are filled with water at different levels. And then when you make sounds, it's like...
Yes, it resonates. And you see the little waves.
Yeah.
What have you learned about facilitation or your facilitation from the first quarter of the festival? Is there something that you're already taking away?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm looking at the notes, and now I'm very appreciative of Anushka for saying at the very beginning, like, have a notepad with you, take all the notes that you want, because you think that you're making notes, but then with a very long festival, it's better that you write those down because you will say like bravo to yourself afterwards. And yeah, when I look at them, it's very funny that what I see is the things that I was holding in my head before joining the festival. And possibly because I was listening for them, but I hear them again resonating. But sometimes they're in the form of a question, and sometimes they're in the form of an answer.
Can you give an example?
So one thing that seemed to be, I seem to be hearing a lot before the conference, the festival, was you're making it too complicated. It needs to be simpler. And I don't know exactly how it happened, but I've been listening to your podcasts a lot lately because like I had a moment of crisis, and I was like, oh, I need to speak to someone. And then I was like, this is too late. Of course you cannot speak to anyone. Like nobody will have time this late. Everybody's extremely busy. So I was like, what's the second best thing that I can do? I was like, I'll listen to the podcast because who knows, maybe there's something. And indeed, there was quite a lot. And one thing was about like the best things, of course, being simple and like being able to capture all that richness into something simple and elegant. And how do I do it? And can we do it? And eventually we managed up executing bits of it. And I'm very proud of how 2 of the workshops turned out. And eventually, like, I go into the first workshop in the festival, and the first thing that I hear from Dove is it was about movement and embodiment. So absolutely nothing to do with like everything that was in my head, right? And he says, when you're making things too interesting, you risk connection. Beautiful phrasing.
Yeah. And isn't it funny that if we bring a question to a space, we will find answers? And that's also the principle of the street wisdom, right? That you mentioned. Oh, thank you so much, Etrit, for taking time for this impromptu podcasting.
Thank you, Mirjam, for inviting me.
Yeah.
For reminding me of the principle of risk.
Yes. Thank you for joining me. Hello, Mo. Welcome on the podcasting boat. Happy to have you here.
I'm glad you're here. I was looking for you. It's like, are you off for your... Oh no, can I be wrong already? To talk about the love you've been showered with. And
yes.
Anyways.
This was slightly intimidating. I've been now on the festival for 15 hours and haven't really slept before. So I'm
not slept before. Yeah. And I'm with you. I stopped at like 6 a.m. And then I was like, oh my God, the alarm. And like, I'm not a morning person. I was like, I got to make it for the welcome, and it was worth it. Yeah. Beautiful. So I'm so glad it's a stunning festival.
So if you can share maybe an impression or an insight, what have you taken away from the festival so far?
so much. It's like so much good that I don't know. I almost want to keep it a secret, right? Like it's locked and loaded in my body. It has been very experiential. I feel like I've been taught in ways that have transformed me, like transformed my former beliefs, philosophies when it comes to facilitation, but in a very embodied way, like beyond the rational, beyond my usual like verbose, like say theorizing, right? I could get out my head and really internalize the message. So, yeah, it's like the next level up of the festival since I've been to 2022, my first taste. And then this one, it's like, wow, I'm just blown away again. The whole feeling it in my body, I don't think I felt it as much the first time as this time. Not a critique, but it's just the levels, just, the standards are just going up every time.
And when you say an embodied experience, what creates that? Can you give an example? So, because everyone speaks about embodiment and about transformation. So where do you see the difference and how did this happen?
Yeah, and that's a weird thing. Like, I'm not an embodiment person is the thing. So for me to suddenly preach it or from like previously being a bit of a naysayer, or I hate the whole like, I don't even know what embodiment is the thing. But because I perceive it to be like get out of your head, which is something I have to do a lot as a facilitator, as a human being, and getting into the body to experience it and not theorize and intellectualize, right? That's what is emerging for me. Another like not a buzzword, but like a hot favorite amongst us here, right? So embodiment and emergence, and those aren't things that came naturally to me. Then Dove is how I experience Dove Tsao, right? His Taoist Tai Chi session, again cryptic as usual. Then I love it all the more. And then I wasn't supposed to reveal spoilers for Thomas's and Florentine's session. It was really super amazing, and they simulated an experience. They created the experience, like no context, no nothing, almost. The prompt was just could facilitators possibly have a role in dystopia, right? And then like Ewan and I were joking about how, like in an apocalypse, like the facilitators would die first, because like then we'll be waving our post-its around, let's talk about this, and then but it's like the man with the axe, who would get things done. But but through Dove's Tai Chi, like Taoist experience, and the other one, which is Thomas and Florence's, like it was kind of the slight spoiler, which might not be too bad. It's like it's a bit of a panic room situation that they created, but it was more than just role play. It was like, bam, like you assign roles and you're in it and you don't know what's going on. So that was amazing. To not be preached, that I think is something that facilitators don't realize they do. And I kind of am starting to appreciate why you originally used to have an iteration of your values, which is no slides, right? Because I think the moment it shows up, or even like, again, not a criticism of people like with skills that I wish I had. Like sometimes when we have our own superpowers, right? Like if we are amazing at video and making it look so slick, right? Then we almost lean too much into it, right? Because like that's my, And same with like weirdness or irreverence, like I need it a lot. Like the whole swearing thing, for instance, right? I always wondered why I needed it so much. Like needing the weirdness to come out a lot, which is the session we attended. So it's 3 that I'm name dropping, right? The Dove Tsao, emergence one, this Etrit and Reese Cranny's Reese Cranny's what is it? The Weird Barbie one, and then the Thomas and Florentine's the dystopia, facilitating dystopia. So the jumping to the Weird Barbie one, which is what I do. I even forgot your original question. Yeah, the whole superpower is a crutch. I think that is also coming up for me. Like, can it sometimes be a crutch? Yeah.
It's a good point, because I have the impression that as soon as there's slides up, something happens to our perception of time, number one, and something happens with the connection to the audience. I think suddenly you only see the slides, and then you're automatically as a facilitator in presenter mode. And then it's very difficult to actually connect to the audience.
Yeah, you're busy connecting to your Miro board, to your whiteboard. And like for me, like it's a bit rich coming from me. If you notice how I really jump from topic to topic, I can even follow my own mind, but I get very distracted very easily. So for someone like me, right, like the additional chat room, like if there are 20 participants, 20 cursors moving across the whiteboard, I just can't. It's very difficult for me to follow something like this. Then I'll just switch off, right? Because it's like my brain is just like, I don't know, gone off somewhere because it's just too much with the cursors and all that. But that's, I don't know, a neurodivergence piece for another conversation. But I think and then the whole process. And we talked about invisible structure as well, or I did, or it was my own learning. I don't know. We were in the other process and emergence one together, right? By Kate and Florence. Go.
Flor and Kate.
Oh, sorry about the names. I'm new to the community and I'm always bad at names.
No, that's absolutely fine. So what came up for you in this workshop? Because yes, there was a little bit of a screen share for the whiteboard, but otherwise it was basically an open conversation with 40 people or so. How did you experience that with your neurodivergence, that if it's too busy, you get distracted? How is such a large conversation then going? And what did you take away?
Then I actually didn't mind that the crowd was kind of siphoned off, as in like the crowd had a space to just let energy out in the chat room. But it's different when you're a facilitator or participant, right? Like when I'm a facilitator, then I think someone was talking about how the chat room's being distracting for them when they're in the facilitator seat, right? Because it's like being on Twitch or something, right? Like you're live streaming and then like that one, I just kind of, the role of text going up, emojis and what have you. But I don't know, I find myself very contradictory, I guess, because actually when I'm in a facilitator seat, I just can't with that because I'm trying to focus on so many things. But then as a participant, oh my God, my fingers are going nuts on the keyboard because there's so much I want to say. And I'll be like, so I don't know, it's a bit contradictory, but I guess for neurodivergence, then there's a lot going on, right? So when we're in the facilitator seat, we need to tune out what would take us away from our facilitator responsibilities and focus. But as participants, we are like, I don't know, I'm like, I've got 10 ideas, can I please like share all of them? Can I like hog the talking stick? And like, even when times when, oftentimes you have to stop me, right? As in gently, but the whole like, oh my God, this idea and that idea, then it's like boom, boom, it's like fireworks in there, right? And you just want to capture everything and you wish someone would take a picture for you, and you really, I don't know, it's a very exciting experience. So, but I guess, it can hurt or harm you, right? Depending on, I don't know, what side you're on and stuff.
And you just said something that I'm curious about. You can stop me gently. So what is the difference? Because I think that's something that almost all facilitators struggle with. So someone is there, engaged, has a million ideas and speaking, and then you realize either they're going on a tangent or they're maybe going into a loop, just repeating the ideas. What do you think are the best strategies to gently interrupt or catch someone's attention back?
As in when I think from the perspective of a facilitator or as a recipient, because then my answer might be quite different. And again, very contradictory. I don't seem to treat people as I want to be treated, I think.
So how do you want to be treated?
I don't really know, because I was telling my ADHD friend that I do get hurt every time I'm stopped because I know it's an issue with me. And like, you don't have to stop me even rashly or harshly. It's like F it, my mind's going off again. And I get pissed off with myself, right? It's like you would experience that, like, okay, no, let go of the, it's like a Rottweiler. It's like, I like this toy. It's like, oh, a tree and a stick. Like, you don't mean anything wrong. You really want to play. But the facilitator is like, Marianne, I think it's time to let go. Then, like, in that micro moment, I think nothing can, I don't know. I think no gentleness can be kind enough for how hurt I've been, like, throughout my life, living with this brain and living with this mouth, and living with this, I don't know, like largeness or taking up too much space, right? Which is like this whole, like, then if you're a facilitator, you're supposed to hold it. It's like, oh my God, do I have to be so nourishing? Like, I'm not Mother Nature. I'm like, I don't have motherhood instincts. Like, does that mean I have no right to be a facilitator? So then that's why, then Esther is the other one. I love her so much. She's in our cohort, right? So I talk about the bull in a China shop thing a lot. And again, see, I didn't answer your question. I think I remember what it was now. I riff off people's questions, then I answer what I want to answer. I would kind of like, your question to me leads me to a reaction. Then my own reaction leads me to another reaction. And then, the whole fireworks, boom, 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 right? So on a good day, the ideas, if people need the ideas person, then I guess I'm good there, right? But I guess I'll need that complementarity, right? To then kind of rein it in. But where was I going? But Esther, I love her so much. So like she caught me out, like the bull in the China shop feeling. And then I guess that contradiction, like me kind of not really treating people as I would like to be treated, be it as facilitator and stuff. Because I feel like I'm always breaking things, right? Like I'm not supposed to be there. Then we were having private conversations, and she's just so nurturing. I don't know if I think I can definitely share stuff because she was coaching me, so it's not like she was showing stuff that I'm not supposed to share. So this is my story. Let me think. Yeah, so she's been always very sweet about, like in our very, very first Turn to Your Neighbor moment. So you were matched, right? So we were having that recruitment call, then you were like bringing in this new flock of NDB community members, right? Then you had your classic NDB Turn to Your Neighbor moment. Then I was, randomly matched with Esther. Can't remember. I just loved her to bits. I don't know. Maybe it was the pink hair. I'm not sure. Then like whatever I say in passing, she remembers. It's like I can't help but remember that you said you feel like a bull in a China shop. But then she came to my session. Then she's like, "Your band. You were at that session too. My psychological safety one."
Yes. Yeah.
Then she's very supportive. You've seen her in action, right? The whole you're like, look at you facilitating. You're just fine the way you are. Then you're banned from calling yourself, then I guess I need that, right? After that.
And I think, so there were a few things that you said that interrupting would always hurt because it makes you feel as if you're not doing it right. And then I wondered to what extent you can detach the feeling of that it's about you as opposed to the behavior. Especially because you're very self-aware. And in your facilitation, you're very structured. So I wouldn't say that you're not facilitating according to how you would like to be facilitated, because I think the way you facilitate and really giving people space and having an order and inviting people to speak in a certain order, this creates a very clear structure and sequence that then maybe also facilitates you or helps you to hold the space for them.
Yeah. And I guess it warms my heart for you to observe that because, again, like holding space, I've been a facilitator for longer than I've been using these buzzwords. But so holding space is something that I discovered in you didn't ask me the usual question, your podcast classic question, right? Like when did you start calling yourself a facilitator? So then mine was in holding space, like me realizing that my supposed focus group moderator skills, right, can perfectly be transposed and transferred to, running a death over dinner conversation, right? To draw people out to talk about, love, loss, grief, right? And then that was when I had my FEM moment. I am an FN facilitator, right? As in I'm not just another, focus group moderator. I'm not just a marionette. I'm not just a client puppet. I have a mind of my own. The power of extraction, the power of holding space is something that I didn't have a language for starters. So I guess to then have that label to say, then I'm not into these kind of buzzwords, but I think when it gives something a name, it helps.
And
the whole container thing. Yep, sorry, go for it.
I wouldn't call holding space a buzzword. I think there's a very deep concept behind it. And I think that there can be different ways of facilitation. So if you have these deep conversations, these transformational, these self-exploring or conflict, you need to hold the space and be very grounded, not to be triggered, and to be present. And then there are other instances where you can facilitate groups, maybe something in between the focus groups where the container doesn't have to be that strong, and where a little bit more maybe flexibility, emergence, or even chaos is possible. But then it depends, I think. It depends on the group. It depends on the context, the topic.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting. Yeah, because when you were building on that idea, I was thinking of the container term, right? So yeah, let me stop calling it a buzzword. I think two thoughts came up for me, right? Like if we think of holding space more loosely, so it doesn't have to be all the warm fuzzies, right? You can also be kind of containing the chaos. And you know how was it the Oppenheimer, what bomb? The nitrogen bomb? The hydrogen bomb? Yeah, so it's the container can be, I don't know, nuclear or super reactive, atomic, or what have you, right? But I don't know, I'm just playing with the idea of that kind of container. It doesn't have to be all about, I don't know, puppies, kittens, and my childhood trauma.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I wanted to shout out for the time when in Yaniv's session, so this isn't at the festival, but it's our community sessions, where we just if we feel so compelled, then we just put our hand up and host, right? So Yaniv has that series of his authentic relating sessions. Then I still appreciate you for holding space for me, or he was doing the parts theater. Then, I got very triggered, the usual. Then I didn't expect it to show up. I was quite, I don't know, then you said, I think then it was a situation, right, to contain, more the situation to contain, but it's then Yaniv, so that it could have been two ways you guys could have gone about doing it, right? So I was kind of in a state, right, because the authentic relating exercises kind of hit on a part of me that was super tender. Then, I was basically crying in session. Then Yaniv, in that moment, Yaniv felt maybe the best thing to do is to get me off camera because of the ugly crying and stuff, right? But then you said, no, what was the part of me that's here right now, or something that's alive right now, is to bring more back into the room. Because otherwise I was quite happy to just run off and cry in a corner, and just check out of the session. But you brought me back, so it was very interesting. Because if I were Yaniv, I would get more to just leave and have her cry or whatever. But you brought me back into the space. And then you guys helped me, oh my God, the way you guys helped me is just so incredible. And it wasn't even a hug, right? It's virtual. And it's just playing with a authentic relating exercise. Yeah. And they're very simple prompts. So so it's been a very short time, but lots of transformative experiences, be it at the festival or inside the community.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And I think then in the community, holding space and having these sessions, it's again a different sort of facilitation, where then also there's more responsibility for the other participants and showing up for each other. I think that's part of community.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you, Mo.
Thank you.
Into the boat with me.
Yeah. I hope for my own love shower one day. Well, just to congratulate you again, I think you are so amazing, right? You're very deserving of the affection you get back from the community, right? Because I didn't know you work. I mean, we know you work really hard for it, but we don't know how much and at what personal cost. So for you to have shared that, then it's there's the other side of Mirjam, and it was a nice moment of vulnerability and made me all the more happy for you, right? Then even in my own kind of personal struggle and growth journey, then I think a lot about becoming the sort of person whose success other people celebrate. I think in the past I was me, look at me, I'm the world's best, whatever. Then even when I almost I didn't even get very far to the top, but already people were banishing me, they stopped loving me or what have you, and no one would have been happy for me, whatever it is that I accomplished that I thought I want to reach for. Whatever, statue, please love me now, I've got this, statue or trophy is what I was going for. So so congratulations for being the sort of role model whose success other people celebrate, right? Because it's something that I aspire towards.
Thank you. And the community and I will celebrate your success for sure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, whatever that looks like, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for staying tuned and for listening until the very end. I hope that you found the inspiration and the wisdom that you are looking for. And I hope that you will subscribe to the show so that you never miss any of the interviews with another inspiring facilitator from across the world. I'm devoted to continue this podcast and to deliver weekly an episode that maintains the quality that you expect and you deserve. And if you would like to help me to maintain this quality and to keep the podcast free, please help us. Visit workshops.work/support to make a small donation to keep the podcast free. Thank you so much. I hope to be in your ears next week.